So if you know this song, you should sing along, Tom and Franz. Wow, wow, no cow, no, no, no. Did you see this one?
You should
The
be in a
Super Bowl
field full of
ads.
oats. That's where you're supposed to be.
Yes.
It's very good.
You're
though.
talking about the Super Bowl ad, right?
I actually didn't know it's a Super Bowl ad. I just saw the ad and was like, wow.
It is an old ad, but then they reused it for Super Bowl, I think 2021.
Yeah, it was from 2014. It went out in Sweden, and then imagine that going back to a 6-7-year-old campaign, which Alen has so faithfully reproduced. You're through to boot camp.
Great. So the question is, who made this ad?
Yeah. Well, people can pause it. How could they possibly tell? I imagine they've clicked on it. But yeah, what a tune.
So yeah, welcome to the DMB podcast, where we share business confidence with the design community. And this is another Business Design Teardown. So we have a look at a brand, a product, a business that design community generally loves. And we take a look at, is this just a fancy design or is it fancy business as well? And in this one, obviously we are tearing down Oatly.
We are. Oatly, who it turns out, not just oat milk. So, to get us started, quick quiz. How many individual products do you think Oatly make? Yeah, one guess each. And I'm going to come to Franz first. So absolutely individual products. You can go over, under,
25.
Okay.
75.
Wow. Okay. Not there yet, Alen.
Oh, no. Okay.
Now, it depends if you're looking in US or Europe. It's anywhere between 30 and 45 products. And
30 to 45.
Yeah, it does vary. Some territories, they don't do some of the frozen products and some of the cooking alternatives. But yeah, definitely over 30, which for a lot of people will be a bit of a surprise because you might think Oatly, they just make oat milk. But no, they're pretty, they're diversifying all the time. So I'm going to run you through what some of those are. If you've not heard of Oatly, they are most famous for the oat milk. So they make shelf-stable oat milks. So those are milks that can kind of be stored outside the chiller. So they have like very long shelf life. Can keep them in your cupboard for a long time. They also do the chilled oat milks. And I think this is the starter off, right? This is where most people have seen Oatly go down the chiller aisle, looking at your alternative to the old udder-based product, to the no cow-based product. So all the chilled ones, so things like the barista version, the low-fat versions, the chocolate ones. So something like 8 or 9 shelf-stable and then chilled oat milks as well. And then they do the on-the-go ones, so little cartons you can take with you. So that's like the OG product. So those alternative milks made from oats using science, some clever shit that we'll get into.
It's funny you say OG because I think on the packaging it even says original, right?
Yes, because they invented oat milk, which I will come on to shortly. But they've got rightful claim to saying they are the original. Whether they are the best or not, I'll leave that to people to decide from their taste tests. So that's the oat milks, and then they also do like yogurt alternatives now, which they cleverly call oat gurts. Of course they do, because they're Oatly and they're quirky. Cooking alternatives, so oat-based alternatives to creams and creme fraiche and spreads and cheeses. And then finally, my favourite category, the sort of ice cream alternatives. So they do a soft scoop, frozen, and like dipped bars. So yeah, not just oat milks.
I've never tried those. Like, are they really good, the ice creams?
I really rate the ice creams.
Yeah.
I like the kind of alternative ice creams anyway. There's like a whole bunch of brands in the UK, and you probably get them as well. Like Jude's in particular is one that I really like, which is, I think, soy-based. I think that's an area where there's some really interesting product innovation been happening. So yeah, out of all of those, which ones are you guys familiar with? Have you tasted a few of those before? Or is it just the milks? Franz, have you dived into their frozen range?
I can happily say yes. I know this brand.
Hey, Phew, you must have been so
I've known it
relieved.
before podcast research.
Finally.
Maybe I said this already. One thing I really, really like is grocery shopping.
Oh yes, you said in the last podcast. It was quite a surprise.
So many people love online grocery shopping. I love going to the store, going through the shelves, seeing what's there, trying out new things. So this is really something that I really, really like. And then cooking with stuff. So I really like their oatmeal products, honestly. I'm not a regular customer, but I obviously tried them. I have a different brand of my oat milk that I go to. I like the oat gurt. Okay, that's cost reasons, okay? So I like their oat gurt, honestly. It's good. And I tried and I okay-ish liked their spreads.
I never tried the spreads. The spreads were news to me from doing this research. So do you use them like instead of like a cream cheese, or do you literally use them like a butter or margarine?
No, it's like cream cheese.
Okay.
Exactly. But I've never tried, and I honestly didn't even know before that they also had sweets, like frozen stuff. Yeah.
So the sweets are the ones that seem to have fallen in and out of favour and seem to be the ones that are less consistent across territories. So yeah, you may not get them where you're listening to this. Alen, into the milks? Tried any of the others?
So I honestly only tried the milk, probably like the regular one. But I'm not a big consumer of milk in general, so not even plant-based ones. I also don't drink coffee, so I don't use like oat. Yeah, okay. That's maybe for a separate episode.
Yeah, separate episode.
But no, so actually when we lived in Germany, we did have Oatly at home all the time. And then we moved back home, Slovenia, and Oatly is not present here. You can find them in certain specialized stores, but it's not as convenient as just grabbing an alternative, and there's plenty of alternatives. So yeah, I can maybe also provide a little bit of perspective on, how you switch from one to the other. But yeah, milk is the only one I'm familiar with.
Cool. I'm going to be trying a few of the others. I'll give the spread a go based on Franz's recommendation. But I've used Oatly for a long time, and then just recently, same as Franz, started looking at my cost of my weekly shop, cost of living crisis and everything, and I've switched out to an alternative as well. So yeah, not been using Oatly for a few weeks, but it is good stuff. I think the town, I know, I'm sorry, I mentioned my hometown quite a lot on this podcast. I'm sure that's quite annoying, but Brighton is well known for its kind of vegetarian, vegan scene and stuff, and I saw it cropping up a lot locally, like many years ago, particularly in coffee shops. The barista edition of the oat milk, and that was what really caught my eye originally. So I don't think I saw it so much in the supermarkets first, but in coffee shops. And I know when Franz maybe gets into strategy, we might talk about how that relationship blossomed with the barista community, which was
because it's pretty much on purpose. It's interesting that that's how it played out for you. But yeah, we'll get to it.
We will get to it. So a quick history lesson. So you might think, Oatly, they're this upstart from the last 5 or 10 years. And you'd be wrong.
That's exactly what I thought.
Same, man. Absolutely the same. They were founded in the 1990s in somewhere called Lund in Sweden. This is going to be another episode where I butcher some names. I'm really sorry if you're Swedish. So founded by a chap called Rickard Oster, food scientist, and developed from research he had been part of at Lund University in Sweden, with the aim to create this sort of nutritious, lactose-free milk alternative. So there's a lot of, when you read about the story of Oatly, people were talking about it as like this overnight success in the mid-2000s. But this was an overnight success that took like 30 odd years, was based on research from the 80s and 90s, like like most overnight successes, there was an awful lot of hard work that went into getting there. But yeah,
getting to the night.
Indeed.
It's a long night.
Long night. So they developed this patented enzyme technology, which basically turns oats into a liquid with a sort of milk-like consistency. So I'm going to take a punt that many of our listeners have tried milk alternatives. And if you've tried Oatly, it's pretty damn good as far as like the texture and mouthfeel. And I don't think it was always like that. Like a lot of milk alternatives back in the day were pretty grainy. You would absolutely be able to tell the difference. But this technology really changed things.
But isn't there like a story where they pitched the first version of the Oatly, and the guy, it was like a person from the R&D of one of the big dairy companies at the time, and they basically spat out milk because it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So even that, like, I think even the technology they developed in the 1990s was not
nowhere near what it is now.
Yeah.
Still, they were laughed away. There's this Oatly do a great job of plotting their history on their website, and I'm going to do a very quick rundown, and nowhere near as entertaining a job as they do. Go and look at their website and look at their history page. It is hilarious, and they've got some great videos about pitching the technology back in the day, and Rickard kind of in this cafe talking about it. And how he got laughed off by investors, and then he's like, "But who's laughing now?" And then like the shades come down and the music drops, like the meme. It's really well executed. There's a real attitude to it that I like. So yeah, massive food innovation from a science-based chap. So yeah, they invented oat milk as we know it today through this enzyme technology, which has been copied many times now. And those alternative brands that Franz and I for budget reasons are now tasting, very, very similar to Oatly, and I'm sure we'll touch on competition as this conversation progresses. So they were initially popular in Sweden and parts of Europe, and were, things were pretty quiet, very slow growth for a long time. We'll touch on that later, but we all know exploded significant growth in the 2010s, particularly after entering the US market. And that all changed really with the change in branding strategy. And for me, I always talk about in these the start of these podcasts about why designers love a product that we talk about. And very often it's about the design of the product or the features or something like that, the quality of it. It's a good quality product, but you can't really have that same lens on it as a designer. It's like, oh my God, I love the design of their enzymes, man. They're great. It's the branding. It's
beautiful science.
The science is just, it is the branding strategy that is the particularly interesting part of their story. I think it's the reason why we're talking about them today, right? Is they do things differently. They're known for this very quirky, very, very direct, very honest branding that is so at odds and so different to the kind of alternative milk and even like vegan, vegetarian messaging that had gone on for decades past. Which
even any food brand, right?
Any food brand, really. Yeah. The only one that I kind of feel like it has a similar tone
I know
of
what
voice.
you're going to say. Can I guess?
Franz, you guess, yeah.
Ben and Jerry's.
No, that wasn't what I was going to say.
I have another
okay,
guess.
Alen?
Impossible Burger?
No.
Come on, what's going on now?
Well, this might just be a UK-based company, but every content designer I know and every copywriter I know wants to go and work for Innocent Smoothies.
You're right.
Yeah.
That for me, they're kind of there's a Venn diagram there of their kind of tone of voice and way of approaching things, which is so delightful and engaging. So, yeah, you've already said, as far as strategy goes, big differentiation between the kind of messaging that had gone before, but again, they weren't like this right out the gate. They weren't like this kind of quirky upstart tone of voice and branding from the 1980s and 1990s. If you looked at the packaging back then, it was so dull. It was nothing to scream about.
It's really bad.
It's not
bad.
Even dull.
It's just
actually bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
And thankfully, when the CEO, Tony Petterson, joined the company in 2012, he knew that this needed to change if it was going to be a success. And he brought in a new chief creative officer who took some convincing, having looked at the existing brand, and this was just fucking oat milk company, to come on board. But it was transformational. Franz, I'm going to try not to steal too much of your thunder, I promise. But that was really where I think it starts to become a fascinating story about the power of design, the power of brand. So yeah, they've gone on to, started to have this connection with coffee culture, which I think really helped with the kind of cool element to the brand as well. But for me, the bit I really want to emphasize, and I think is the area that designers maybe should look into, and we are definitely going to talk about today as being a key strategic decision, was deciding to dispense with all of their existing kind of marketing strategy. Traditional food marketing companies work with a lot of sort of different agencies. It's a very kind of bottom-up approach to marketing, whereas they brought in this guy called John Schoolcraft as chief creative officer, and he basically just got rid of all their current marketing, internal, external agencies, everything, and developed what they decided to brand the Department of Mind Control, which is a incredible
It's
name.
crazy, yeah. Didn't even that, like, they completely let go of the marketing department, and this became marketing department.
This has become...
That's the story.
Yeah.
So that's the story they like to tell. So we came on, and what we did was completely dismantle current marketing and put marketing as a business function being dismantled, and marketing and brand being put in the hands of creators.
Absolutely. And Franz, I know you're going to go deep on this, but a few kind of headline points is no outside agencies anymore, so they had control of every touch point, which is just unheard of. Takes an awful lot of effort, but by bringing everything internal, they were able to do stuff that no other marketing department would be able to do. They were very brave, and that started by not being briefed like you would with a normal marketing company, where decisions are made with finance and sales and the CEO, and then that is briefed out to the marketing team or the marketing agencies. The Department for Mind Control, the creative team, are in the middle of all meetings. And this is where we want design to be, right? We want to be there. We want to have that trust. And this came from the fact that the new CEO knew the power of creative in changing the direction at Oatly, and had absolute trust in John Schoolcraft, someone he knew from previous work. He knew this is the guy that could come in, have a seat at the table, and fucking own it. And incredible work they've done. Franz, I can see you want to jump in there, mate. Go for it.
Oh, good. I just heard you swear again.
Sorry.
So that was my laugh about it.
In my mind, I always be like, explicit episode again.
I'm sorry.
I'll need to type in that button again.
I'm really sorry. I think it's the Oatly kind of
Yeah. Oatly,
It's their
the
tone of
brand
voice.
brings
It's
it
the
out of you,
brand.
right?
It's bringing
They have
it
this
out of
page
me.
like "fuck Oatly," right? It's
Yeah.
one of their websites.
Well, you know what the
You're
problem
taking
is.
everything away from me. Come on.
Oh, man.
I'm looking at their strategy document that I implore you to do a Google for John Schoolcraft talks on YouTube. The guy is so engaging, and he shares their strategy document. Franz, are you going to touch on this later?
No, go on.
And it's full of expletives, which I love. So it's basically like saying this sort of this kind of scale where you've got scared shitless on the left and fucking fearless on the other side. This is literally the wording they use in their strategy document. And then good at the top and evil at the bottom. And they said like 90% of all companies are in the scared shitless and some are in the good or evil camp, and they don't do anything about it. They're just, they're happily bobbing around there. Whereas Oatly are in the fucking fearless good quadrant, right up there, top right. That's Oatly. And there's another brand, Monsanto, who we might touch on later, who they have in the like fearless but evil
Evil.
camp. So they're like, that's our strategy document. We pull that up all the time. And I'm really sorry for all the swearing, but these guys are bringing it out of me.
No, that's going to be a great story today, because we are coming right back to the bottom left quadrant at the end of my story.
Wow.
What's the bottom left again?
Bottom left is scared, shitless, and evil.
No, sorry. Then I meant bottom right.
Bottom right, evil and effing fearless. It's too late now. This is an explicit episode. We can swear as much as we want, can't we?
So this is where we will return to. But first, let's talk strategy, right?
Yes.
So, last time I did it a little bit differently, right? Last time I went through like company history and only then explained to you all the significance of the decisions. Tom said he liked it. Sorry, Tom, it's going to be different again this time. So we will go through 3 eras of this company. And the first era is what you already described, right? Founded in 1993, 1994 by these brothers Öste, Rickard and Björn Öste. Both of them, the scientists at Lund, we know this, created this or researched this enzyme technology to turn oats into liquid. And they tried to sell it to dairy companies because they were like, okay, I mean, who can we? They were scientists, as we said. And the scientists are also not the best business people. I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anybody here, right? But scientists usually like to do science and like to create something, and then somebody else does the business side of this. So they wanted actually to sell it, and they were, as you already said, laughed out of this room. Dairy companies are like, I don't like the taste, I don't like the concept. We do what we do, and we do quite well. So no need for that.
It just makes sense. Yeah, it was just way too early for them to.
Exactly.
But for me, it was funny to hear that this was the beginning of the story, because if you look at the branding today, it just feels like it began as being like, we are completely against dairy industry, we want to fight against them. But actually, in the beginning, they pitched this whole product to the dairy companies. Yeah.
Because if you have a product that's similar to something and you don't want to sell it yourself, who are you going to?
Of course.
The company that you're similar to, because maybe they can do something with that. So that didn't work out. So they decided to start their own company. So just a bunch of people, the brothers together with, and I'm trying now, Ingegard Sjöholm, Inger Alden, Leonard Lindahl. So these were the founders, together with a cereals company. Interesting too, right? So cereals company, another, let's say, related business. And they founded the company Siba AB. So it's not Oatly, but Siba in 1994. And this was the start of what I call the Woodstock Era. So these eras, they have location names this time. So this was the Woodstock Era. So Woodstock Era was, okay, we are food scientists. We know that a lot of people have issues with digestion of lactose. So we're going to do something that's more natural. So this was this green movement of like 80s and 90s, right? So they presented themselves as nutritious, lactose-free alternative to milk. They targeted basically lactose intolerant people. Their brand was super technical, super like emphasizing functional benefits. As you said, it wasn't really a brand. It wasn't great. And it was sold in these health food stores, like the ones that, again, like Woodstock, right? So you have this early wave of, let's say, let's be different, let's be more green, but in a time where there was still big boom of, let's say, capitalism and faster and higher and yeah, more money, right? This was the 90s. So it was sold exclusively in Sweden. It was exported a little bit into neighboring Nordic countries like Denmark, Norway, Finland. And it almost like it didn't have anything to do with the current Oatly that we know. But there was one strategic decision that they made back then that is still up to date, which is the sole focus on oats as raw materials. So that was their research, but they also specifically decided no almonds, no rice, no soy, only oats. And that's still true.
And the company was called Oatly at the moment, at that time, or?
The product was called Oatly. The company was called Seba. Yeah.
Right. And today company is called Oatly and the product is called?
I think the company is also not called Oatly, honestly.
I think Oatly Group AB something.
Yeah, that could be. Okay, so that strategic decision that they made back then, that's still true. So, right, when you look at dairy alternatives, you have all bunch of different raw materials, right? We have, as I said, almonds, rice, soy. Some they don't even brand as a specific raw material. So we know almond milk, soy milk. Some companies, some brands, they also have plant-based milk, and they don't really brand as now I am coming from oats or I'm coming from this specific plant. And that's something that we need to keep in mind, because this is still something that sets them apart from other manufacturers in the dairy alternatives markets. So that's still something that they capitalize on, saying, hey, we're in this business since the 90s and we have never done anything other than oats. We are the inventors. We are the ones who know it all. We are the ones who can create the best oat products ever. And they have capitalized on this in their whole communication, right? So that's what they also play on. We know how to do this. And this Woodstock era, that lasted for about 20 years. So it lasted until 2012. And at this point in time, they made about 17 million US dollar in revenue. About, right? So I just took Swedish krona revenues. Yeah.
In a year, or 70 altogether in 20
17
years?
in 2012.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So from 1994, they were able to grow from zero, starting company, to 17 million US dollar per year in 2012.
Which is like, okay, but it's nothing like crazy. You know, you wouldn't get any investors for this kind of growth.
Exactly.
Getting to 20 million.
I mean, you can have a nice company with 17 million.
Very, very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. But it's not a company that we will all be talking about today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the thing happened that Tom already pointed us towards, because at this point in time, 2012, the Öster brothers brought in an outside CEO, Tony Peterson. And this chap took a friend with him, which is called John Schoolcraft. Exactly these two people that Tom already introduced us to. So Tony as CEO and John Schoolcraft as Chief Creative Officer.
But do you know that the guy, did we talk that the guy who sang that song in the Wow Wow No Cow is actually the CEO?
Yeah, Tony,
It's crazy. Like,
so this CEO, just painting you a picture, if you haven't seen the ad, you can watch the ad. It's a Super Bowl ad. So he stands in the middle of an oat field with a keyboard and sings this song.
and which other CEO would have done this?
Exactly.
Not many.
That already shows a little bit of the vibe that these two people introduced, right? And they opened what I now call the Berlin Kreuzberg era. So if you're not familiar with...
You are going to have to explain these eras.
Okay, so Woodstock is all clear, right? So we are in the first Green
Hippie.
Revolution, hippie.
Yeah.
Now we are in this kind of hipster era. And if you're not familiar with Berlin Kreuzberg, then I just give you Brooklyn as the alternative.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Am I somewhat correct, Alen? I mean, it's not exactly the same, but I mean, yeah, tell me more.
Portland, Brooklyn, hipster beards, arm sleeve tattoos.
Kreuzberg is good. I would have gone for Prenzlauer Berg as another part of Berlin. It is very, hipsterish and so on, but it's a little bit more like there are families and there are kids. So, you think a little bit more about the planet and all these things that I think also is what Oatly is trying to portray with their values.
Yeah.
But yeah, Berlin is a nice as a city, I think it's a good analogy for this type of this stage of the company.
Yeah. So this era, Berlin Kreuzberg or Brooklyn era, lasts from 2012 to 2016. So bear in mind, I made this up, right? So
made up the name, not the years. You know, I'm liking where you're going with this. This is good.
Okay, so from 2012 to 2016, Tony and John completely transformed this company. So they turned Oatly into this quirky, edgy, provocative brand that it kind of still is when you look at the website and when you look at everything they do. So they continued to focus on oats. They invested further in product development. I mean, there was a way towards these, what you said, 35 to 45 products. So obviously that is a big thing. But the core strategic decisions, in my opinion, are on branding and marketing, a focus of branding and marketing, but also, to be fair, their operations on sustainability and distribution. So go through it step by step. First one, branding and marketing. And that's exactly what, Tom, you already introduced. I mean, most of us listening here will know Oatly in one or way or the other. But the whole story starts with Tony and John, dismantling, eliminating this traditional business-focused marketing department and putting branding and marketing into the hands of creators and creatives. And what they wanted to achieve is going away from focused groups and targeted marketing and data-driven marketing. That's what they said, which what they say leads to messaging that everybody expects. And their idea was to have creator-driven branding and marketing with a guideline that they call consistently inconsistent. And I really kind of like that. So
what does it mean?
Consistently inconsistent means that you don't know the next move because they don't know the next move. They kind of have values. They portray themselves. They say that they are a value-driven company. Value-driven company for them means they focus on being good for people and planet. And that's what their company is about, not only in their products, but also in their operations. But everything they do in marketing and branding and product development, it's all over the place. Like it's consistently inconsistent in terms of what exactly are you now doing with your next ad campaign? What exactly are you now doing with your next packaging? What exactly are you now doing with your next product? It's like, let's see what happens. We just need to progress. And this is what they famously said that their strategies now, right? They had values that they based the whole company on, but the rest should be consistently inconsistent.
Yeah, they don't give an S. I don't know how true this is, but in the talks that I've seen, they talk about traditional marketing departments would just spin out if they knew the fact that they don't have any KPIs. They don't really track these campaigns terribly well. They're not, like you say, they just see a move that they think is Oatly-esque, and they can be bold, and they just go for it. And they just trust their instinct that if they are authentic and own these moves and be bold, that it speaks to the brand and will have the impact that it needs to have. Now, whether that's completely true or not, I don't know. I'm sure there's some sort of level of tracking that happens, but
yeah. And also, they are consistent in what they're doing.
Yes.
That's just another way of, creating this brand. And creating this brand was, as we said, completely in the hands of this creative department. They do their own packaging design. They do their own typography. They do their own website. There is no outside agency. And the way they do it is different, let's say. It is refreshingly different. So they completely repositioned the brand from this health and function focus to trying to create an emotional lifestyle brand, Oatly being good for people and the planet, and establishing it as this antidote of the dairy industry, saying, this is bad, this is old, we are new, and we are the way forward.
Yeah, like
and
rebels.
I'm saying it so black and white because that's exactly what they are doing. So they aim for a love it or hate it brand.
Yeah.
Whatever they do is so edgy that you can't, like, if you follow it, you can't say meh. You can either say, okay, that's really cool, or you're like, nope.
There's no middle
Not
ground,
at all.
is there? It's. I think it's probably worth. I think most of us, including myself, until researching this episode, I was very familiar with the actual carton packaging, and I've read it while my coffee's brewing and found it aligns with everything you've said there. But if you dig a bit deeper and look on the website and look at some of the activations they've done, it does push boundaries. If you've only looked at the shelf packaging, you might be like, yeah, I see that a bit. But look at some of like the video campaigns they've done and some of the billboards and takeovers. Like there's some they push boundaries for sure.
Yeah. So you ready for some examples?
Mm-hmm.
So they love controversy. They use every controversy they get, and sometimes they're even provoking it. So good example was they had in this campaign of 2014. So Alen, do you want to sing it again? What was the tagline?
Wow, wow, no cow.
Yeah, and then?
No, wow, wow, no cow. It's just repeated twice as far as I know.
Okay, so the tagline of this whole year was milk but made for humans.
Yeah, I think they still use this tagline, right?
Yeah.
Or is it just like milk? I think they had to change it, right?
In some territories.
Exactly. So in 2014, they had this new slogan, milk but made for humans. And they were sued by a huge Swedish dairy conglomerate because this is where they launched their ad campaign first. So first thing they did was not being quietly fighting this, but they decided to publicly cover the court hearings, even if it was not a public case. So what they did were they were making sketches and like paintings, and then they just basically made a comic or a publication out of this court case. Obviously, one way to do it, eventually they lost, and they were not allowed to use the slogan milk but made for humans anymore in Sweden, which is why they launched a huge ad campaign in the UK with the exact same messaging. So here you can already get a sense for how this company works, right? You are sued for something. This definitely costs a lot of money. What are you doing? You're not trying to keep the ball low and kind of minimize the damage. No, you kind of try to create even more damage in terms of let's be loud about this. And that's exactly what they did. I heard another really cool story. I listened to a podcast with a German brand director because now this is a little bit of the consistently inconsistent. So this is, you would expect this, right? There is something about Oatly not being milk but better than milk. That's one thing. So you would say, okay, that's kind of in line with what Oatly is and does. So German brand director tells the story. They landed the first railway, the first big corporate client in Germany, which was German Railways. So German Railways have their onboard bistros, and they have their bistros on their in the train stations, and they have Oatly won this German Railways as one of the very big corporate accounts. And what they wanted to do is sign more of these B2B business accounts. So they launched an ad campaign that said the CEO of the company that first reaches 10,000 liters of Oatly product will receive a stapler. And that was an ad campaign, right? So that was a B2B ad campaign saying, hey, if you are a corporate partner and you go through, you're the first one to go through 10,000 liters, you will receive a stapler for your executive office.
So if they would order 10,000 liters, or if they would consume, or
the first one going through. So you don't have to order 10,000 liters, but the first big corporation that goes through consumes, like in total 10,000 liters of Oatly, the CEO will get a stapler. So maybe that wasn't the biggest campaign, right? But I think it's like it shows a little bit the direction of what they're doing. And I personally like this campaign, but honestly, again, they are still consistent in a way, because most of Oatly's communication is about plant-based diet being the way forward in a world threatened by the climate crisis. So most of the communication is about, hey, they are doing studies with pro athletes showcasing the impact of vegan diet. 2-year study comparing the football team, half of this or part of this football team eats a vegan diet, the other half eats a non-vegan diet. And then they track this study, publish, make it into content, and publish the results. Or they compare the environmental footprint of dairy products and plant-based products. So a lot of their communication is actually exactly in this nutritional and sustainability field of the market.
Yeah. Are you going to talk about the packaging stuff they have on there, where they actually have like the carbon footprint of each of their...
Yeah, I mean, this goes... You're completely right, and this is my next point, and I would actually even give them credit and say it's not only a marketing focus. They do have an operational focus on sustainability too. So their full production is carbon footprint audited from raw material to final production. Their packaging is made from renewable materials, and as you said, also labels the carbon footprint of it. They try to have as much as possible localized production, which is obviously a business reason because you have shipping costs, but also a environmental reason because you don't have to ship in the first place. So transportation. They do focus on waste management and selling residue of the production to other companies so they can use it. So there is not only the inherent upside that they communicate of, well, we are not dairy, we are plant-based, and inherently this has a lighter footprint on the world if you go alongside these publicated these publications, but they're also doing something in their business practices to be a sustainable company.
I've even heard them frame themselves, quite sincerely, as we are a sustainability movement that sells oat-based products.
And that's marketing again, I would say.
I think it is, yeah.
No, but I agree with you. So the thing is, but I think everybody is very conscious as soon as somebody has sustainability so big on their flags, right? And that's maybe that's not even fair, because why would you attack somebody who says they're sustainable more than somebody who does say a word about sustainability and everybody knows they're not sustainable? But again, you're much more, I think people tend to be much more critical towards these kind of companies who say they're sustainable. And then they're under much more scrutiny. Which leads me, or maybe now let's do a small detour to something we have already mentioned. So despite their efforts that Oatly tries to be sustainable and is, I would think they are a sustainable company, much more than a lot of other companies. They are criticized of greenwashing. They are criticized of the fact that they actually do waste management in a way that people don't like it. So I said they do waste management by selling residue to companies who use it. Well, these companies are pig farms. So there was another backlash that, hey, you are preaching to us that we should not drink dairy and consume dairy, but then you sell your residue to pig farms. So that was a huge backlash. What else? Just generally, just being criticized for a lot of the campaigns that they have. And I think I'm not here and I haven't done, honestly, enough research. And I'm also not I'm not trained in, how do you call this even? I'm not trained to make a verdict about whether this company is actually sustainable or not. But what I can say is that Oatly has a very interesting way of dealing with this criticism, which is first saying that they never said that they are a perfect company, but they are a good company with true intentions. So that's the first reaction. Whenever somebody criticizes them, they're like, hey, yeah, we do sell to pig farms. And okay, thanks for pointing this out. We'll look into that. We never said we were perfect. We just said we're a good company. We are better than most of the other companies. And we can promise you that we have true intentions about being sustainable. And the other thing is the fuckoatly.com website.
Mm-hmm.
So have both of you seen this website?
Yeah.
I haven't actually.
Okay, that's also a nice example of storytelling, Tom. Similar to the About Us website on their Oatly page, on the Oatly.com page. Fuck Oatly basically summarizes the biggest backlashes and controversies about the brand. So there is an instance where they sold a small farm in the UK for infringing their brand. They are discussing this, then this issue about selling their residue of the production to pig farms and so on. So these huge topics. But then there's also a repository of tweets. So you can have a look at okay, these are the big topics, but here are a ton of other topics that people criticize us for. Then you click on this, and what you see is just screenshots of tweets where people gave the company... Yeah, I wanted to swear again. So people criticized the company, and one detail, they're also doing community outreach and answering all these messages in-house. There is no external communication agency. So they see just discussions with random people. Some discussions very objective, other discussions like very, let's say, how discussions are in the internet, which is troll discussions. So they kind of try to explain stuff. Sometimes they even troll the author. So it's basically just a collection of all criticism, or maybe not all, but a collection of criticism they receive on social media.
It's an interesting PR way of handling it. I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
And have you seen F Oatly?
Yeah, looking at that
so
now.
Literally like fuck Oatly, and it says like, welcome to fuck Oatly. You're probably here because you totally hate fuck Oatly. So it's like a spin on like, if you don't like that page, you can actually confirm by clicking one big button that you don't like, that you dislike foatly.com, and 362,000 people have confirmed. I'm gonna be now and one more just to see what happens. Oh, just the number goes up. So it's like a playful game. Like, hey, we do this all like storytelling ourselves, and we use and spin this bad news so in a way that we control the way it's portrayed. But then also we play on this like game of like, hey, if you actually dislike all these people who dislike Oatly, you can help us show your approval somehow.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely going into this direction of love us or hate us, right? This really, really edgy way of having a brand. But yeah, it's also smart because you can still control what's being said, right? Mm-hmm. So they discuss or they show their view on these topics, on these controversies. So yeah, it's also PR in a way, or not in a way. It's actually pure PR. Cool. That was brand. You ready for distribution? The last big strategic move in the Kreuzberg era.
Give it to us.
Cool. So distribution. One thing they did during this era was opening new geographic markets within Europe. So just remember in 2012, what they did was, joining the company as CEO, being the new CEO, and turning the company around, basically, rebranding the company, completely putting the company in a different positioning. But what they also did is expanding. So they entered the UK, they entered Germany, they entered the Netherlands, they entered a whole bunch of other countries in Europe. And what's even more interesting than the geographic expansion itself is who they targeted within their markets. Because traditionally, the company sold in health food shops and supermarkets. When the company grew, they were more mainstream in supermarkets. But Tony and John made, I would say, a genius move to put the focus on baristas and cafes. So they basically used baristas and this whole hype around this community. Maybe they even were helping this hype to position the Oatly brand. And they used baristas as ambassadors for Oatly. So these baristas, they were rigorously trained. They were even given a specific product, the Oatly Barista Edition. They did pop-up events at coffee shops. So there was a huge investment, a huge deliberate focus on this. And this is also, let's say, how the company entered the next era of the company. And because this is exactly how they entered the US market. In the US, Oatly was the first company to offer oat milk. So it wouldn't be a great move to just put your oat milk into supermarket, right? Because if a consumer just doesn't know what this product is, how are they going to buy it? So what they did is, in the beginning, only targeting baristas, and again, only targeting New York and Brooklyn. Hence the Brooklyn, hence the Brooklyn era of this, or let's say entering Brooklyn with this strategy was the end of the Brooklyn era of this whole company, because this entering a market through this cafe and barista avenue has two huge upsides. The first one is you introduce people to your new product in a controlled environment. So as I said, the baristas, they were trained how to use the milk properly, how to make the best foam, and how to present an oat latte as perfectly as possible. And it enables you to build a premium brand. So if you're part of this barista movement, bearded, like shirt, inked arms, like cool dudes, then you're part of this, right? So you're basically creating a movement, you're creating a premium brand. So this Berlin, Kreuzberg, Brooklyn era was quite a successful one for the company. They, as I said, took over the company in 2012 with 17 million US dollar in sales, and they moved it to slightly over 40 million US dollar in 2016.
And we have to state what their goal was when they took over. So they said, we're going to turn this into 1 billion in revenue company. So each year we're going to go from 20 to 1,000 millions, which is a billion. So 50x.
Exactly.
So it took them 4 years to basically, what did you say, double, triple?
Yeah, a little more than double. So 17 to 40.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, 2012 to 2016, 4 years, doubling revenue. Keep in mind, you're not a tech company, right? You are producing stuff. You are like, this is a product company. You need oats, you need factory, you need shelf space. Shelf space in the freezer, in the cooling section, is like among the hardest thing you can ever get. So yeah, it's not a tech company where you can just like say, okay, let's up our service. And I mean, I know it's not as simple, right? But there is more to scaling than just selling. That's what I'm trying to say. So they did a pretty okay job, right? They built the business from 17 to 40 million in 4 years. But as Alen said, that was not the goal. They wanted a billion in sales. And from 40 million to a billion in sales, there is a long way. And with linear growth that they had from 2012 to 2016, I didn't do the math, but I would say that, yeah, we would have another century to
with
actually.
linear, yes. So with linear, yes. I just wanted to add one thing before you go into the third stage of the company, which is this barista strategic move. It sounds like, in hindsight, a lot of these strategic moves look so simple and so obvious. But when you're in the position of trying to make them yourself, then it's super, super tough to know what to do, because you can do so many things, but what most companies, what most leaders, business and design leaders tend to do is just copy what everyone else is doing. And in this case, this wouldn't have worked, because we had gatekeepers within the companies, within the retail shops, who were like, no, like, what is Oatly? What is oat milk? Why should we store you? And they made a really, really smart strategic move with baristas. And there is another industry, very parallel industry, who used exactly this playbook. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Same industry, other kind of food.
I mean, like, yes, basically. So plant-based meat.
Yeah.
So they actually went after high-end chefs and restaurants first to gain the, let's say, popularity, and for more people to learn about this product, to gain this feeling of, okay, this is a legit product category. And only then did the founders of the plant-based meat companies went to the retailers and told them, hey, we want to be on the shelves right next to meat. Like, don't put us like in some other part of the store. And it sounds so simple and obvious in hindsight, but strategic decisions are usually simple but not easy.
I like this thought, because I think we can go a little bit deeper into the topic of why is this actually not obvious to do. So in the hindsight, as you said, it's kind of obvious, right? So you have a barista movement. Everything in barista is cool. You have people buying these super expensive coffee machines, but if they're not buying these super expensive coffee machines, they buy themselves a latte for €6 or $6. So if you go into that if you want to build a brand, but think the other way around. How much do you think you can sell of milk in a big supermarket compared to a coffee shop? So I think when you think of volumes, you're like, why even bother with coffee shops? How much milk will you sell in a coffee shop? It's nothing. Like, what you want to do is you sell your liter or gallons container of milk. This is your business, right? Your business is to put packs of milk into a shelf and sell as much volume as possible. And then somebody comes up and says, hey, let's for a moment not care about volume. Let's go into coffee shops who don't sell a lot of volume milk, but we need to do this in order to enter this market. And everybody tells you, you don't
That's
enter
stupid.
a market with not selling, right? You enter a market through selling. And that's why I think it's super counterintuitive, because you are obviously judged by volume. And when I say volume, there are two kinds of volume. The first one is volume of price. So your liters, multiplied with the dollars or euros a liter costs. But you're also judged with the liters that you actually sell. And when you go into a new market and you say, well, first we're going to sell not many liters because we're going to go into coffee shops, that's exactly opposite to what KPI usually is used in this company.
Yes.
Okay, so we said steady growth, great brand. Everybody knows the company, also now in the US. But your goal was to reach 1 billion, but you're still only at 40 million. So what you do, you go into the next area of the company, which I call Silicon Valley.
Nice.
So while the era before, the Brooklyn Kreuzberg era, was more nuanced to explain, there's a quite short summary for this era. It's about exponential growth. It's about hockey sticking the oats. It's about getting from 40 million to 1 billion in the foreseeable future, because you have already been CEO for 4 years. And as we know, external CEOs don't usually live longer than either 4 or 5 or 6 years, or they're super successful and they live for 20 years. But there is barely something like in between. Either you're successful and reach your goal, or you're out. So, as said, 2016, they entered the US market. 2018, they entered the Chinese market. They plan to capitalize on the China's growing demand on dairy alternatives, and they also expanded into other Asian markets like Singapore, South Korea around the same time, and they also entered markets in the Middle East. And to see the full picture of this international expansion, I need to tell you that they did not only establish sales presence there. They opened production facilities in the US and China. So they're not only selling the same everywhere, they're tweaking their messages in every market. They're even tweaking their recipes for the markets. They are producing in these markets. And from what I just said, you might already sense that this type of growth can hardly be financed through their own operations, right? Through their own cash flows. So they needed investors. And they needed not just any investors, they needed investors with big pockets. 2016, Belgium-based Verl Invest and a company called China Resources acquired a majority stake of Oatly. So not
what
just
a name,
investors.
by the way. Like, what a name. China Resources.
Yep.
Like, if you want to be generic, they probably use Helvetica for their logo.
The Times New Roman. The not so cool Helvetica. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
how much did they invest?
I don't know. I couldn't
Okay.
find the data. The only thing I could find was that they did not only invest, but they bought a majority stake of Oatly.
Okay.
So Oatly was not Oatly anymore. Oatly was owned by, majority stake was owned by Verl Invest and China Resources already in 2016. The key factor was Oatly, like financing Oatly's expansion into the US and especially China and Asia. Hence also the investment taken on from China. And it also showed that the Brooklyn area was kind of over. They wanted to go big. It wasn't about repositioning the brand anymore. It wasn't about refining the product anymore. It was about growth. 2020, next investment. Oatly received 200 million of investment from a group led by Blackstone Investment, including celebrities like Oprah Winfrey, Natalie Portman, Jay-Z, I think, and former Starbucks CEO. So like big names, not only in like the consortium. I'm not only talking about the celebrities. I'm talking about Blackstone too. Huge investment company, huge investment firm, private equity firm. Now, 2021, Oatly went public with an IPO on Nasdaq. They raised 1.4 billion in this IPO, and they were valued at 10 billion market cap. So we're still talking about the same company, right? It's oats, it's oat milk, and yes, they have 35 to 45 products, but it's still oat milk. And it's still the same company that had 40 million in revenue in 2016. So this whole Oatly story that was so carefully crafted, it kind of turned sour, right? I told you that the brand always saw itself under criticism, with these like controversies about where they sold their residue and how sustainable they really were. But they just created this edgy company and reacted in a way that you could basically accept, right? But now that's different, because there was a huge criticism about the investors that they actually took on. More precisely, it's not only investors anymore, it's the owners now. And for many people, that just doesn't add up anymore, right? So there was huge criticism about these, this, on the one hand, Oatly positioning itself as sustainable, ethical, people and planet focused, and then taking on investors or selling to owners that, let's say, mildly put, have a questionable record on these values of sustainability, being ethical about people and planet.
Wasn't one of those investors like involved in financing deforestation of Amazon?
Exactly. So first thing is, China Resources is not only called generically China Resources, but it's actually an enterprise that is owned by the People's Republic of China. So many people just criticize that, well, human rights issues and association with Chinese government isn't as closely related as you would expect from Oatly. Then Blackstone, again, criticized as having investment in companies that stand exactly for the opposite of what Oatly actually stands for. It says, it's involved in these companies being associated with deforestation. It heavily invests in fossil fuel companies. Blackstone CEO is kind of questioning climate change just in general. So maybe not anymore. So I tried to Google this, but so it's a discussion. Not gonna sign up on this. But just in general, these two companies that are now the owners of Oatly are exactly the opposite of what Oatly positioned itself at, and they have a very clear stance on that. Oatly, because obviously they hear the criticism, but what they say is that to make large-scale systemic change, and I'm quoting here, in the global food system and double down on our mission of promoting sustainability, it's necessary to engage with and have the backing of major financial entities. And I continue, accepting investments from major global players, even those with less than perfect environmental records, we can potentially influence and drive positive change from within.
So we like take money from the bad guys so they don't use it in the bad stuff.
Yeah, we are now in this circle and we can maybe influence them now.
It's like, when people say this, I don't know. It's so hard not to be a little cynical. I'm going to change the mafia from the inside. It's like, no, you're not.
Exactly.
You're going to end up dead, man.
And that's how they try to do it. So also on the bottom of who we are page on Oatly, there is a message from the CEO. It reads super short, but I think you can interpret this as a answer to the criticism about this scaling and investment strategy. And it reads, we need to remember that speed and scale are exactly what our mission requires. So the story behind them is, we do good and we can only do good if we have money, and we need to do good fast because otherwise our planet goes to go with this language of this episode.
You're fully leaning to the explicit nature of this episode.
Me personally, I don't buy it.
How does it make you both feel as a message? How did that play out for you?
I think there's so many examples where this is not done this way, so it's not like there are much nicer ways to acquire, not nicer, but there's ways to, if you need funding, you can still get funding from other sources. You don't have to go to questionable companies and private equity funds that invested in these type of activities beforehand. So I think even if there's validity to the fact we need to, there's time sensitivity, there's urgency, we need to grow fast. There's other ways to
finance it,
to raise money.
Yeah. I remember recommending Oatly to a friend a few years ago who was going veggie, and as soon as I mentioned the brand to him, he was like, "Aren't they the evil ones though?" And I was like,
"Wow, sheesh."
And he shared an article from The Guardian with me where they were talking about this stuff. It was like, yeah, like it's, I can understand how it's only a small investment, but what a potentially incredibly damaging decision to make to be financed through those companies. I mean, this is not news to us, we're talking about it now, but that's the thing that stuck in my friend's mind. Not all the good stuff, all the messaging, the history, the kind of culture they were trying to, and maybe not the wisest move is what we're saying.
I usually don't like to speak in sayings, but I initially thought of one saying, and there is a German and an English equivalent. I'm just going to use the English equivalent. It says, "Who pays the piper calls the tune."
Yeah.
So the person who pays the person who pays the person who makes the music also will
Chooses
choose the song.
And it's not gonna be wow, wow, no car.
Do you think Oatly are going to sue us for overplaying that tune today?
That's why I didn't play their tune. I'm just singing it, so that's fine, right?
I hope so.
I
If
feel
not,
like
we're
the
gonna use
Oatly of now will be
'Cause
dropping a lawsuit on the
We
DMB.
don't have the financial backing of anybody to withstand a lawsuit.
Their lawyer up, Alen.
Okay, you made me worried
No,
now.
I'm
But we're gonna
joking.
use their playbook on them. On
Yeah.
them.
You
Yeah,
could
that's true.
Just
Yeah.
gonna. No.
Okay, so this leads me now to the point that not only me, but also here in the news of what happened in 2023, it seems it's also the end of the Silicon Valley era, honestly. Because this person who led the company from 2012 to 2023, Tony Peterson, was replaced as the CEO in end of May this year. So the new CEO is, bear with me again, Jean-Christophe Flatin.
Flatin?
I
Something like
don't know. He joined Oatly a year ago, and he's honestly a food industry veteran. So he has a huge track record of 30 years within Mars, where he managed brands in, I think, pet foods and chocolate. So he knows the food industry. Not, again, coming from a company that is particularly well known for their sustainability efforts. Again, not want to be sued here. I haven't looked especially close into Mars, but Mars didn't strike me as having a strategy of positioning themselves as very sustainable. So Tony Peterson is gone, the person who actually made Oatly into what it is right now. He didn't live until his goal was achieved of getting to 100 to a billion. I guess Alen will tell us a little bit more about current revenue numbers later. There is another signal that was published this year, which is Oatly selling assets. Oatly built, as I said, not only distribution and sales in the US, but they also built their factory in the US. And they built especially a factory in Utah. And that was one of their biggest prides, because they said this factory is one of the most sustainable of its kind. Huge focus on energy efficiency, huge focus on water use, the goal of 100% renewable energy use, also sourcing oats from Utah. So this was a prestige project, a huge cornerstone, a huge puzzle, piece of the puzzle of entering the US market. And now they're selling it off. They're selling it off to a manufacturer, actually, to a contract manufacturer. So they will still, as I understood, manufacture the oat base. And then this company, Yaya Foods, who now buys this plant for almost 100 million euros, will take control of the manufacturing and the packaging of the product in the end.
So they will still produce Oatly products, but
Exactly.
it will be through this entity that bought this plant.
So what they're going to do is everything will stay the same, but they just got some money back that they apparently desperately need, because why else would you do this now? But I think this whole strategic decision, this strategic decision is definitely not explainable from my perspective. So why does this help this brand to get stronger? Why does this help the brand to be more successful, the company to have more successful? I think, that's a different perspective that it needs. And I think we have now teased it long enough, the numbers game. And maybe we now need to go into numbers, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you why they're selling the factory just in a bit. But let's go step by step, okay? So,
Okay.
again, when Tony took over the company, the publicly stated goal was we want to get to 1 billion, whether it was US dollars or euros in revenue. I don't remember, but it's roughly, it's in the ballpark. Okay, so but maybe let's now first have a look at revenue from. No, actually, let's go to the market cap, which kind of explains the problem. So market cap is how valuable the company is, and as you said, Franz, the company IPO'd, so it went public in May of 2021, so roughly 2 years ago, and the price at which it was selling at the time, so one stock was $17. And actually, in 2021, there was a lot of optimism around this company and the whole market. So by the end of the first day, which is how you measure like how optimistic investors are about a company. So by the end of the first day, the price was not $17, but $22. Great. So the company was valued at over $10 billion. But if you look at the stock price of the company today, it's worth, one stock is worth $1.04, which means the market cap is now only $600 million. So they lost 95% of value between 2021 and 2023, so in just 2 years. And a fun fact, if your stock is valued less than $1 for 30 consecutive days, it gets delisted. It means it's no longer sold on the exchange. So this is like Nasdaq's internal rule for how they delist stocks. And if that happens, then you're in big trouble as a public company. So why? But now let's have a look at why has this happened? Why has company gone from such a high valuation in 2021 to now being on the verge of bankruptcy, I would say. Okay, so let's have a look at 2016, which was the final year when the company was still run non-Silicon Valley style. So in 2016, the revenue of the company was $55 million with a very, very tiny profit of $170,000. So that's basically nothing. You are even, but still, you're not making any loss. But even if we stopped here, we would say, oh, this is not the best ratio between the revenue and profit. But obviously, Oatly was growing heavily, so this finances even tilted further. So in 2020, the revenue went from only 55 million to 420 million, which is really an astonishing growth. So from 50 million to basically 420, but their loss was 58 million. So this means that for each dollar, basically every time they would sell a product, and let's say that this product was just $1, it would cost them $1.13 to make that product. So they were losing 13 cents on every dollar they would sell. Now let's go to 2021. Again, impressive growth from 420 million to 640 million.
That's crazy.
It's crazy for a hardware product, for a physical product. But their losses went from, let's say, 60 million to 200 million. So 3x, which is, again, crazy. Can you say crazy again, Franz?
Crazy.
Yes, that's super crazy. And so every time we are selling a product for $1, it costs us $1.33 to make. Let's go to 2022. Did the picture get better? Revenue went from 640 million to 720 million, and their loss went from 200 to 350 million. Franz, go ahead.
No.
That's
I'm
crazy.
out of praises.
That's crazy. So now, for every dollar we bring in, we actually need to spend $1.48 to produce that thing. So, I mean, honestly, when I opened the annual reports, I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw like revenue, okay, 700 million, that's okay. And then I saw like, there's a column called profit and it says 340. And then this profit is like written in brackets. And this is how, if you read annual reports and something is written in brackets, this actually means negative number. So I had to like be, no way. Like I triple checked that this is actual result, because when you look from the outside, it looks like a successful big company. Everybody loves it. Everybody talks about it. It's just like a category leader, at least in Europe, for sure it is, in terms of the oat milk. And I would never have guessed like to see these numbers, because this is quite a big loss for a company that doesn't have like, didn't go down the VC route of raising hundreds of millions from the venture capital. So let's have a look at 2023. Is the picture getting better now? Now in new year. So obviously in 2022 they were communicating publicly with their investors that things are not going best, but we're going to try to turn the corner. So revenue again is up. Actually, it's 13% increase from the first half a year of 2022. So they're projecting to make 780 million in revenue this year, which is again 50 million more than last year. And their loss is going to be slightly lower. So instead of 350 million, it is projected to be 300 million, which is still a big number. So the company raised, when they sold their shares, they raised roughly 1.4 billion US dollars. And only between 2016 and 2023, they lost over close to $1 billion in losses. And that kind of explains why you start selling your assets. You sell your most fancy factory. So you said, I didn't even find a number. So how much was it, Franz? 100 million?
About a little bit less than, like 98 million.
98 million. Yeah. So that basically buys you 4 months of losses at this rate. Yeah. So they're basically trying to extend their runway. So and try to find a way to break even, and to hopefully gain some confidence from investors, so that the stock price can go up, because then maybe you can sell more shares and you can raise even more money, and then you hopefully get into like a positive reinforcement, because at the moment this is looking very bleak. When you report numbers like this, investors lose confidence, your stock price goes down, you cannot raise money anymore, and there is no way you can find your way out. And just as a comparison, so we had another company that wasn't really profitable that we covered in the teardowns. It was Warby Parker. Do you remember their revenue? How much was it?
Don't remember, but have the notes.
So it's 600 million. So it's very similar scale, right? 600 million, and their loss was 100 million. And here we're talking basically like in 2022, Oatly had 720 million in revenue, 350 million in loss. So I guess I'm saying, like, if you love Oatly, stock up, buy as many products as you can, because with this you're helping the company, but also you're helping yourself if you love the product, because maybe it won't be
ain't gonna be here.
Maybe. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that? So to my naive brain, selling your production facility to try and raise, get some investment to make the bottom line look better. You need that facility to make the product. So would it be a case of short-term sell assets like that with a view to probably reopening or buying back, something like that? It just seems like you need it to make the product. I'm kind of lost, and I would think that any investor worth their salt is going to see through that strategy. Don't know. It seems very desperate to me.
I mean, what it does is it transfers from your it eats away your gross margins, right? So what you're doing is, first you own something and you had to pay money to run it. Now you sell it, and now you need to pay somebody else to produce your products. So what happens is your direct cost of producing this product will just increase, because it will still be produced, right? Before you had to run the factory yourself. Now you sell the factory,
Okay.
and then you basically still produce in the same factory, but you pay somebody else to run the factory.
Right.
So this goes into your direct cost of producing the product, meaning your gross margins will be lower. But at the same time, what you have is 100 million in cash,
Sure.
which if you need, it's a good thing,
Yeah.
right? So what basically happens is, so what you have is you have a business that was barely profitable in 2016, right? Then you got huge cash inflow. Did you even get huge cash inflow? Well, they bought.
you sold stocks.
Yeah, no, not even stocks, but the first investment, right? You had an investment from this Belgium investment firm and China Resources. So you get this money from them. Then you get 200 million of investment from BlackRock.
Yep.
And then you collect 1.4 billion in an IPO.
Yep.
So all of that gives you, let's say, 1.6 billion in cash in the bank. And then what you do is you use this money to scale your production and your operations and hope that this money is enough to not only scale, but in the end also have a business that is profitable. But if you just scale and you don't have a business that's profitable, it just means that it will year for year, month for month, eat up the cash reserves that you have built with getting these investments. And eventually, that's going to be zero. And then the question will be, will there be another investor that chips in some money? As we have seen right now, that's not as easy. We see big, highly funded companies going bankrupt at the moment. So just looking at VanMoof, for example, huge e-bike company with a similar value set and mission set than Oatly. So you can basically put them in the same category of companies, value-driven companies building products for a better world, just went bankrupt because they had the same issue, getting a lot of investment, trying to build a company, trying to scale, in the end didn't work out, ran out of money. And if that happens to Oatly as well, there won't be much Oatly anymore.
Could this be one of the reasons why Oatly shot up in price recently and I've switched to another company?
Good one. Alen, I want to hear more about this.
I mean, most of those price increases were just due to the fact that the raw materials also went up. There was inflation, there was shortages of oats in Canada and US last summer. So those jumps were predominantly because of just increases in the raw materials. Unfortunately, not because of the pricing power that Oatly has. By the way, did you know that Oatly is not even the biggest oat milk brand in the US?
Yeah, so they're
It's actually
second
the
place
second
now,
biggest.
aren't they? Getting caught
And
as
who
well.
owns the biggest brand?
HP Pool something? Call it this?
A dairy company.
A dairy company, yeah. But the exact name is, I just slipped my mind. But yeah, it's a dairy company, and the brand is called Planet Oat. The one that has more than 30% market share, and Oatly has 20-ish% market share, which means they're not the biggest player in the US and Canada, but they are definitely in Europe. But speaking of the gross margins, I mean, this is where the story just even gets sadder. More sad. Sadder is not the word, right? More sad. Yeah. So we had an amazing gross margin company 2-3 episodes back, ESOP. I don't think we will ever find anything like that.
Wow.
90+% gross margin. Do you want to take a guess at Oatly's gross margin? Maybe Franz first. Or did you see it?
I did see it.
It's got to be single digit based on what you've been
It's
saying.
very close to being single digit. It's 11. It was 11% in 2022. 11%. That's really, really bad.
That's really bad.
So no wonder. Yeah, because I mean, in this industry, if you want to be profitable, you should aim above 25. So ideally somewhere around 30, 40, ideally even more, but like at least 25 to 30%. So I had a look at another let's say, dairy company, which is public, Danone, so the Paris multinational company with a lot of dairy products. And they also own like an oat-based milk brand in Europe called Alpro. And their gross margins are around 40%. So that explains the new leadership, because they're trying to find a way for this company to be run more, more like a dairy company and more profitably, through distributions, through operations, just to get to a stage where they can be financially sustainable and recover, and so that their stock price can recover. However, the situation is bleak also on the consumer level. So Franz talked about the fact that their two biggest bets in the last few years were they have this, they call them Americas. So I guess that's North and South America and Canada probably as well, and China. So these are two new markets that they have opened. America has roughly 30% of their revenues, and Asia or China is roughly 20% of their revenue. And both of these markets are either struggling or Oatly is struggling. So first, just a few words on the Europe. So Europe brings Oatly 50% of their revenue, and that's where they are undisputed king of the category. And that's also where they seem to be profitable. So you can't find actual like profitability per location, but the way the document is written, it reads like in Europe they're profitable. So if they only stayed in Europe, which would be roughly 350 to 400 million in revenue, they would be okay. But they have these two new markets that they wanted to develop to get to $1 billion in revenue, so Americas and Asia, and that's what seemingly isn't going that well. And that also explains why they would sell a plant in America and not in Europe, because you want to keep the one in the market that seems to be working best for you. But yeah, the US market, the thing that happened for the first time in the last 35 years is that the plant-based milk market actually declined. So for 35 years consecutively, it was growing, and now it went down for 2 to 3 percentage points in volume. So this is not in price, but actually in volume. So when I say volume, I mean liters, because price-wise, it's actually went up, I think. I actually don't have the data here, but I'm assuming that it went up because of some other data, because prices went up because of what we just discussed. So prices went up because of the raw materials, but actually volume went down. And it's the same thing for Oatly. So actually they had a growth of 19% in in Americas, but volume-wise, they only went up by 1.7%, which tells you that most of this growth came from increasing prices because of the new raw materials. And certain researchers and trends are showing into the direction that this market is going to become tougher and tougher to compete in. So when you have a stagnant market and there's just more fight amongst the companies that are already in this place, which means prices are getting lowered. You know, companies want to actually stay in the market. They want to not lose the market share. And what happens then is, certain promotions, companies go all the way to the break-even point so that they are the ones that survive, and then later they maybe increase the price. And if this is going to happen in the in Americas, then Oatly is in a really bad position to compete because they don't really have a chance to lower prices.
Because they have the worst margins already.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the gross margin for others, but because Oatly is one of the rare companies to be public and to be selling this type of product. But my assumption is that they have a worse gross margin than others, or at least they don't have a successful, profitable dairy company at the back to fund those losses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, Planet Oats Planet Oats parent company can probably provide runway for quite a long time.
But 1.2 billion runway. So I would even doubt that. So I see the point of, hey, you can only sustain this fight about margins when the market is stagnating. If you have a big backer in the back of your company, and we already discussed that the market leader of oat milk in the US is called, what do you say again?
Planet Oat.
Planet Oat, exactly.
Owned by HP Hood LLC.
HP Hood, yeah.
Exactly. Did you find numbers about, like, how big is this company?
Just having a look
private
now.
LLC.
Okay, but I doubt that they have 1.2 billion in the bank to
I think they have
to
2
back
billion
the-
a year, but is that... sorry, just trying to find it. Carry on.
life
So
research going
revenue,
on here.
it's roughly 3 to 4 billion. But it's not public, so you don't know exactly how much reserves they have and so on.
So what I'm trying to say is that I
they
think
would
these
know,
companies
so-
are just more financially viable run and have a better cost structure.
Yeah.
And they definitely don't have a billion in the bank to finance the losses of Planet Oats, just as actually Oatly had just 2 years ago.
Yep.
So that's crazy if you take into account that point A is you already had this money to grow. You were still not able to build a business that has healthy gross margins. And then considering that you are still a premium product. So if you compare like plant-based milk with animal-based milk, it's what? 50, 70% more expensive,
yeah,
I would
easily,
say.
especially Oatly. Yeah.
Oatly maybe even 100%. So if Danone has a gross margin of 40% with 100% lower priced products on average. I mean, I know they have Alpro, but let's say blended all together, they still have lower priced products on average, but still you are the company who only has premium priced products, and you still can't have an operating margin that is somewhere close to bringing you to profit. Then where do you want to go, right?
Yeah.
You can't raise prices because then people won't buy you, won't even more shy away from buying you in financially unstable times. And you can't also lower your prices because your margins are already so bad.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. So they already talk about ramping up, actually investing more into promotion in the Americas. But that means even lower gross margins. So it seems like they want to fight by promoting better, not by lowering the price, which I guess it's a good sign. At least, like, you don't want the premium product to debase itself by going with a lower price. So I think this is a right bet, but it still shows that it will actually cost them even more in this specific market, to get to profitability. We didn't even talk about China yet, and apparently the problem there is just consumer preference and the way these preferences shape over time are much more fluid. So Oatly was seen as a novelty thing, something like a Western brand, and it sold really well in the beginning, but post COVID, the sales are just not. They're just struggling. So there are a few factors for this. One is I just talked about the different consumer mindset and preference for novelty. And the second thing is also just the Chinese economy, for the first time in a long time, looks like it's headed down a recession. Did you know that urban youth unemployment in China is 21%?
No.
It's like
I had no idea.
crazy number. And if that's true, because again, with Chinese statistics, it's less transparent than in the Western world, and as such, it's hard to know if this statistic particularly is correct, but at least shows certain worrisome signs for the Chinese economy. And if that's true, then in these kind of recession times, people do reach for cheaper alternatives. And if we now combine these two things, so we have Europe, which is profitable and working well, and then we have America and we have China, who as markets are struggling for you in like as a product, it does paint a bleak picture in terms of reaching 1 billion profitably. But maybe another way is just to divest from these two markets and just be okay with Europe. But that's not what is in their strategic plans. The strategic plans is to stay active in these markets and to just find a way to profitability. But yeah, it is a really tricky situation.
Seems to be a trend in the alternative meat, dairy alternative world generally. What a bigger conversation than today, but we've seen it with like Beyond Meat, and a lot of meat alternatives suffering a similar fate at the moment, or similar trend. Yeah, just with a physical product and scaling this is just a completely different ballpark than with the software, because you need to build plants, you need to move stuff. So it's just much more expensive, and it's just much more likely something to go wrong. But let's go into our opportunities and threats and buy, sell, hold. Any volunteers as the first ones? I'll be honest, I struggle with this one. I mean, the threats we've already talked about from Oatly specifically. It's a easy product to copy, and there are plenty of alternatives out there that are better backed and have better economies of scale and are cheaper. I guess we've already covered ad nauseum that threat. They seem to be on the brink. I'm struggling to see an opportunity, to be fair, outside of maybe taking some really dodgy investment and having to apologise for it.
Yeah, mine opportunity bucket is also empty, but I think the opportunity they have is almost like descaling, divesting from certain markets and just focusing better on those that are more promising. Yeah, but the threat, I think you pointed the biggest one, Tom, like just running out of money, going bankrupt. In this case, probably they'll still find a buyer who's going to take them over. I'm sure Danone or someone else would be glad to just plug this into their machine. Another couple of threats I could think of is climate change, droughts, floods, other severe weather. It just affects oat production and the price, and basically all of your products rely on this same raw material. So if something happens to the global production of oat, which I did check and it was pretty constant over the last few years, globally it was constant, but you have fluctuations locally. And I don't know if you mentioned this, Franz, but they built plants, factories in each of these three markets. I think you did, right? So they have plants in China, in US. Do they still have one? Did they have two in the US and they just sold one?
One is in Texas and one is in Utah.
Okay, so they kept one, I think, as well. Which means, you rely on the local oat production. So that's a big threat in general. And then since you do so much business across the globe, there's also currency risk. I think they try to work around this by actually having, again, plants in those locations, because then your costs and sales are in the same currency. But if they start closing the factories and they just say, hey, we want to have a centralized production just in Europe, then this currency risk is increased. So it looks pretty bleak on my side.
Yeah, same here. I'm not going to repeat what you said. What was surprising to me as well was that if you listen to these brands, you feel like the consumer world is actually shifting towards plant-based alternatives. And I've learned in the research that that's not happening currently. So dairy market is growing at a slow pace. I think US was 4%. Non-dairy market in the US was, as you said, stagnating, slight decline or very small
decline, 2%.
So I was under the impression that consumer behavior is actually changing, and we do see a shift from so there is always two things, right? Two things can grow. You can have growth in dairy and plant-based stuff, and you can also have a growth at the same time in non-dairy, plant-based stuff. So this can be true if the whole world prospers and has more purchasing power. But then if that's not true, you need to eat into the other field. So if you want to grow as plant-based, you need to take away from dairy and animal-based. But apparently that does not happen. It doesn't happen in dairy products. Doesn't happen also in meat products. So that was very surprising to me. Could obviously also be that this is current, like last year post-COVID stuff, because these things are still much more expensive. Like non-animal alternatives are usually still sold on a premium to meat or animal-based stuff. So it could also be the economic situation in general, that people just do not on a daily basis go to the more expensive alternatives. So that was surprising to me and adds another threat. So, and I don't see, I don't want to predict how the world economy goes, but we don't see like a very early boom again, I would say. So we can be quite certain about that, right? So
true. So this not being investment advice, I'm still gonna ask you, Franz. Would you be buying, selling, holding? It's so low that it's tempting to buy, right?
Yeah, but if I see the losses and the money that they still have left, I would still not buy. And I don't know if I would sell. I mean, obviously, it's not worth anything anymore if you have bought a few years back. Yeah. So that's not great in the first place. But yeah, I think this company does not have a good outlook.
Tom?
Ditto. What Franz said, yeah, sadly. Because ultimately some of their maybe some of their sustainability decisions, and there are companies out there that are are reproducing this product in ways that aren't as ethically minded as Oatly. And yeah, I think it's a shame that a company like Oatly that is in part trying to do good stuff is probably going to bite the dust. So yeah, I would not be buying, but I would be sad seeing gone. Should that happen?
I don't think it will happen that it will be gone. There just might be a small little logo on the back of their packaging that says Danone or something like that. Because when you have such a strong brand like Oatly, someone will buy you even if you go bankrupt. Yeah. So you don't have to be worried. So we can end on a high note. So you don't have to be worried about Oatly going away from the stores. But it's like financially wise, it's in a really tricky position. It can still be turned around, but yeah, currently it doesn't look best.
Sorry, Oatly.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't expect that when I went into the Oatly research. I mean, I did know about the Blackstone investment and there was a huge backlash, and I didn't really research at this point in time, so I knew that this would be something I would encounter in the prep of this podcast, but I did not expect to encounter devastating financials.
Yeah. Neither did I, but when I saw those big numbers in brackets, I was like, oof. That's gonna be an interesting one. Good. And you have anything else in your notes, or are we done?
All done.
Done. Good. Then, as always, I'm going to invite you to our 7-day mini MBA. So if you enjoy this episode and you enjoy the business topics intertwined with design work, you will enjoy our 7-day mini MBA. It's a free email course where you receive 7 emails over 7 days, each email teaching you a business concept relevant for designers. So to sign up for this, you can head over to d.mba/mini MBA. So d.mba/mini MBA. Thanks everyone, and see you soon in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.